the consumption and the services part of the economy to catch up to make this whole recovery more sustainable going forward.
South Korea's central bank has upgraded its economic outlook, now projecting growth this year to come in at 4%. That will be the fastest pace of annual growth since 2010. The upward revision came as the Bank of Korea kept its benchmark interest rate, as expected, unchanged at 0.5%. A surge in investments and exports due to strong external demand has propped up the country's economic rebound, even as coronavirus restrictions continue to weigh on domestic consumption. Exports jumped at their sharpest pace in April, more than a decade, while consumer inflation hit a near 4-year high, driven by higher energy and food costs. The BOK also projected that consumer inflation this year will now hit 1.8%, up from its previous estimate of 1.3%. It's now preparing to pull back on its run of pandemic-era record low interest rates. Singtel has posted its lowest earnings in at least 2 decades. Annual net profit came in at 554 million Singapore dollars, down by 49% compared to a year ago. The bottom line was dragged lower by exceptional charges of close to 1.2 billion Sing dollars, including a non-cash impairment charges for investments in Amobee as well as Trustwave. But Singtel's operating revenue was also down 5% on year. Singtel CEO said the disappointing results were mainly caused by the COVID-19 disruptions and ongoing structural challenges. But its subsidiary NCS and data center services were the bright spots, showing growth as enterprises rush to digitalize and transform their businesses. Singtel has begun a strategic review of some of its units. Looking ahead, Singtel will invest more in 5G and expand its market share in Singapore as well as Australia. Sachin Mittal of DBS Bank tells us why he's keeping a close eye on India when considering the outlook for Singtel.
For Singtel, I think the key driver for growth will come from turnaround of Bharti. Bharti has already turned around from losses into profits. And so in that sense, that is essentially going to be the key earnings driver, because we are looking at double-digit growth for Singtel, mainly led by Bharti Airtel. And besides that, we're expecting that the core business in Singapore and Australia, hopefully, we have seen the worst of pandemic and roaming has kind of bottomed out. Difficult for it to drop any further from where we have seen already during the pandemic. Hopefully the core business stabilizes, Bharti turns around, and that should kind of give the growth. 5G business is an opportunity and also a high capex kind of a risk. And in that sense, I'm not very positive on the overall 5G scenario. I think all of us know about high capex of 5G. The question is how much growth can be derived from 5G. Singtel is betting big on 5G. We have to wait and see what happens in the future on 5G.
The Singtel shares were down by as much as 3.2% before paring some of those losses. It ended the session down by 0.4%. Meanwhile, the STI gained slightly more than 0.5% today. Elsewhere in the region, sentiment is being weighed down by fears that central banks might start to consider winding back their emergency stimulus. The Nikkei was also hurt by concerns over a possible extension of COVID-19 emergency measures. It lost 0.33%. While in South Korea, tech heavyweights dragged the benchmark down just under the flat line. The Shanghai Composite, though, gained 0.4% this session. Industrial data calmed worries over policy tightening in Hong Kong. Shares of Next Media, which is owned by pro-democracy tycoon Jimmy Lai, ended the session 50% higher after the company said it had enough working capital for at least another 18 months. Well, that's it for business. Back to you, Jill.
Thanks so much, Eugenia. Malaysia's Transport Minister Wee Ka Siong says the 2 trains involved in Monday's collision have been retrieved from the crash site 3 days earlier than scheduled. Track repairs are now being carried out between the Kampong Baru and KLCC stations. Dr. Wee says a total of 5 LRT stations will be impacted as power will be shut along the affected stretch. He adds that additional checks will be made once repairs have been completed. Currently, only one track will be operational between 7 stations. This resulted in an additional 16-minute journey. But Mr. Wee says once the track is fully repaired, the bottleneck effect will cease. And this will allow Malaysia's LRT service to operate at a 50% capacity, as mandated in the tightened restrictions due to COVID-19. The head-on collision left more than 200 people injured and dozens hospitalized. 2 victims had to undergo brain surgery and another needed cerebral resuscitation. Authorities say driver negligence was the cause of the accident, though further investigations will take place. Singapore has reported 15 new locally transmitted COVID-19 cases. 3 of them are unlinked cases, while 1 is in a foreign worker dormitory. The Health Ministry says all 12 linked cases were already quarantined. There are also 9 imported cases. Of these, 7 are returning Singaporeans or Singapore permanent residents. All the imported cases were placed on stay-home notice or isolated upon arrival. The 24 new cases to date takes the national tally to 61,940. Frog skin and fish scales can soon be used to repair human bones. Scientists at Nanyang Technological University have developed a way to use the biomaterial instead of a patient's own tissues. It will also help tackle the problem of aquaculture waste. In a first-of-its-kind study, the team used discarded bullfrog skin and fish scales to create the biomaterial. It acts as a scaffold for cells to multiply, leading to the formation of a new bone. Patients with jaw defects from trauma or cancer surgery may use this recovery method in a clinical setting in about 5 years' time. It could also be used for bone growth, such as dental implants.
The normal way of getting the collagen sources and our in-house development method, we can actually save up to 40% of the time to get the same exact materials. So it's more than 40% of the shortening of the time frame to get our final product compared to the traditional methods.
Ahead on Asia Now, a landmark victory for a group of Australian teenagers aiming to block the expansion of a coal mine. Later, 10 years on from the Fukushima nuclear disaster, a look at what it's like for former residents who have returned.
There's still apprehension on how the one country, two systems political system will continue to evolve. But it's the resilience of the people, holding on to their culture proudly, and strong institutions all help to make Hong Kong what it is today, and the hope of a better tomorrow. Roland Lim, CNA, Hong Kong.
The internet, it's contributing to global carbon emissions.
I'm going to get one first time.
ভবিষ্যৎ খুবই খারাপ অবস্থা
이자고 뭐 안 보인다니까.
This is like the iPhone of 1902.
We collect information from the landscape.
She's my wife, she's dying, please help.
It's majestic.
I finally made it to the realm of the gods.
Oh,
伝統文化歴史をぶっ壊す外国人、日本から叩き